I'm Evelyn Rowe, 61 years old, and I was supposed to be the proud mother of the groom that night. Instead, I found myself seated against the swinging door of the kitchen at the old granary, my dress brushing against cold stainless steel. Every few seconds, a waiter pushed through with trays of chicken marsala, shouting, "Corner!" as if I were just another obstacle in their path. The smell of fryer oil clung to my sleeves, and I could hear the music thundering on the other side of the door, the laughter, the toasts, the clinking glasses. All of it sounded like a celebration I wasn't invited to. I had paid for so much of it. The open bar hours, the flowers for the brunch, the extra time for the band, those checks were mine. I signed them with love, thinking of my son's happiness. Yet in the printed program, my name never appeared, and when the mother-son dance was announced, it simply didn't exist. The spotlight belonged to everyone else, to the Sloans, to their perfect photographs, to the image they wanted to project, not to me. I smiled as guests passed my lonely chair, pretending I had chosen this spot. I smiled so no one would see how my stomach burned. Every smile tasted of bitterness. My son, Owen, looked over once, his eyes nervous, but he looked away just as quickly. That small turning of his head told me everything. He wasn't going to stand up for me tonight. So I sat in the shadows, a forgotten figure with a forced smile, while the music soared. And as I sat there, pressed between the clatter of dishes and the glow of chandeliers just out of reach, I made a quiet decision. If they wanted me out of sight, if they wanted me erased from their picture, then I would erase something too. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't cause a scene. I would simply reach for my phone and start making calls that would change the rest of their night. The night before the wedding, at the rehearsal in the small white church on Maple Ridge Road, I noticed the first signs. The pews were filled with friends and cousins. The minister moved us through the motions, and I tried to savor the moment. But Caroline Sloan, Nadia's mother, had taken charge of the schedule with a clipboard in her hands. She circled the room like a director, making sure no extra scenes slipped in. When the organist paused to ask about the mother-son dance, Caroline answered before I could. "We've decided to simplify. Too many moving parts." She smiled tightly, her pearls gleaming in the fluorescent light. Everyone nodded, relieved to move along. I stood there, frozen, as if the floor had tilted slightly under my shoes. I swallowed whatever words rose in my throat, because I didn't want to ruin the mood. My son, Owen, avoided my eyes, fiddling with his tie as though he hadn't heard a thing. The next day, the venue looked beautiful. The old granary had been transformed with draped lights and tables dressed in ivory linens. Guests poured in wearing their best dresses and polished shoes. I walked in, hoping to feel some pride, but instead found my name missing from the printed program resting on every chair. The Sloans were listed with flourish, thanked for their generosity. I was nowhere. Not a mention of the checks I had written, the hours I had spent planning, just a blank space where I should have been. When I asked about my seat, a young attendant pointed me toward the far side of the hall, where a table had been pushed against the swinging kitchen doors. "Here you are," she chirped. The hum of the refrigerator drowned out her words. I smoothed my dress and sat down, pretending it was all fine. From where I sat, I could see the glow of chandeliers over the dance floor, and I told myself to stay calm. I watched the bridal party march in, the applause echoing. Owen looked handsome in his suit, his smile boyish, a glimpse of the little boy I once carried to Little League. Nadia was stunning, radiant under the lights. Together they looked perfect. Perfect enough that no one seemed to notice me tucked into the shadows. The dinner began. Waiters hurried in and out through the swinging door beside me, balancing trays, bumping my chair each time. I lifted my glass politely, though no one toasted me. The speeches rolled on, Richard Sloane praising his daughter, Caroline giving thanks to their friends, even Nadia's cousin telling stories of childhood summers. I braced myself for Owen's words, hoping he might turn the spotlight, if only for a moment, but he kept his remarks short, thanking his in-laws, thanking his bride, and then moving on. My name never passed his lips. The band struck up a lively tune, and couples filled the floor. Guests clapped along, drinks in hand, while I sat alone at my kitchen's side table, the smell of garlic butter clinging to my hair. At last the DJ announced, "And now, our special dances." I held my breath, waiting for my cue, waiting to be called. The bride's dance with her father came first. The crowd swayed, eyes misty, then silence. No one called for me. The DJ moved right into the next set, as if the idea of a mother-son dance had never existed. My chest tightened, but I kept my smile steady. I had been erased, cleanly and quietly, as though I were never meant to be part of the story at all. The music rolled on, spilling from the band into every corner of the room. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and I sat at my lonely table beside the kitchen door. I clapped when others clapped, smiled when someone glanced my way, but inside I felt the weight of something breaking. Each toast, each dance, every burst of laughter pressed harder against my chest. When the servers cleared plates, I excused myself and slipped outside. The night air hit my face cool and damp, carrying the scent of rain on the horizon. Away from the noise, I breathed deeply for the first time in hours. My car sat at the far end of the gravel lot, and inside the trunk was the binder I had carried for months, the neat folder of contracts, invoices, and receipts. I opened it under the dome light. My hands steady now. Line after line bore my signature, deposits for flowers, extensions for the band, 2 extra hours for the open bar. Every page carried my quiet promise to give my son a celebration worthy of his new life. But I realized something in that moment. They had erased me from the picture. But the ink of my name still paid for half the canvas. If I was invisible to them, then my money should vanish too. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want shouting or spectacle. I wanted something quieter, sharper, more precise. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the florist's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, cheerful even at this hour. I explained calmly that the brunch flowers for tomorrow would no longer be needed. She hesitated, reminded me that the deposit was non-refundable. I told her I understood. I accepted the loss. What I couldn't accept was seeing my arrangements fill tables at a gathering where I wasn't welcome. She apologized softly, promised to cancel the order, and we hung up. Next, I called the band leader. I could still hear the muffled echo of their music spilling from the hall behind me. I asked him to cancel the extra hour I had booked. His voice dropped, professional but surprised. The deposit would remain with them, of course, but the contract allowed me to withdraw the extension. He confirmed they would end at the scheduled time and no longer. My heart slowed as I thanked him. Finally, I called the bar manager. By now, it was past 10:30, the open bar scheduled to stretch until midnight. I requested that service return to cash only after the next round. There was a pause, then a short confirmation. No drama, no disruption. Guests would still be served, but the luxury I had paid for would not extend into the night. One by one, I closed the contracts I'd opened. Each call felt like a stitch pulled from a fabric that had wrapped me too tightly. I leaned back against the seat, the binder heavy on my lap. The pages now more symbol than record. The deposits were gone. Yes, but so was my silence. I looked back at the hall, its windows glowing gold, the music still loud enough to shake the glass. They were celebrating without me, and now, in small but certain ways, without what I had given. I straightened my shoulders, tucked the binder back into the trunk, and walked toward the hall once more. Inside, no one would notice. Not yet. But I knew, and that knowledge steadied me for what was still to come. The drive home felt longer than it was. Maple Ridge was quiet at night, the streets lit only by the occasional street lamp and the glow of porch lights. I pulled into my driveway, the house standing still and silent, as if waiting for me. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and set the binder on the dining room table. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood, the familiar scent of a place I had cared for alone. I flipped through the pages, one by one, checking what I had canceled, but there were charges that made me stop. Line items I had never approved, an upgraded champagne package, a fancier dessert table, even late-night sliders brought in from a catering truck. My credit card was listed, my account number printed clear across the invoice. My name had been used to cover what no one had asked me about. I sat there staring at the numbers, the betrayal cutting deeper than the missing dance or the forgotten seat. They had not only erased me, they had borrowed my signature, my name, to build the night they wanted. I pressed my palms flat against the table, steadying myself. I could dispute these charges later with the bank. Tonight, I needed air. In the living room stood the cedar chest I hadn't opened in years. It had belonged to my late husband, Mark. He'd left this house long before his body did, but he had sent back a box of things before he died, a stack of records, a few shirts, and at the very bottom, 2 sealed envelopes with my name written in his familiar hand. I had never opened them, until now. My fingers trembled as I slid the first letter free. Mark's words were uneven. The ink pressed hard into the page. He admitted what I had always suspected but never confirmed. Owen was not his by blood. Mark had left because he couldn't face the responsibility of raising a child who wasn't his. He had run, and I had stayed. I dropped the letter into my lap, the room spinning. For years I had shouldered the weight of being abandoned, of patching the holes he left behind. Now I knew the truth, that my son had never been his to claim in the first place. The pain was sharp, but beneath it was something else, a strange clarity. I opened the second envelope. The handwriting was weaker, as though written in a hospital bed. Mark wrote that he was sorry, that he knew I had been the true parent all along, that biology hadn't mattered. Not really, not when measured against sleepless nights, school lunches, scraped knees, and graduation days. He told me I had chosen, every day, to be a mother, and that choice was more powerful than any bloodline. "Don't let anyone erase you," the letter ended. Tears blurred the words, dripping onto the page. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling the weight of it settle inside me. For so long I had wondered if my sacrifices mattered, if my place could be taken away as easily as it seemed the night at the wedding. Now I had proof, in the words of the man who had failed me, that my role was unshakable. I leaned back, eyes closed, the house quiet around me. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, but inside a steadiness grew. The wedding had tried to write me out, but these letters reminded me I had written myself in long before. I wasn't invisible. I had chosen to be a mother, and that truth no one could take away. A week passed before I heard the knock at my door. Sunday afternoon. The sky low and gray. I had just finished folding laundry when I saw Owen standing on the porch. He looked older than he had at the wedding, the weight of something hanging on his shoulders. His hands were shoved into his jacket pockets, his tie loose, as if he had dressed in a hurry. "Mom," he said quietly when I opened the door, "can I come in?" I stepped aside, and he walked into the familiar living room, the same place where he had once built Lego towers and later sprawled on the couch with homework. He looked around as if the walls themselves carried judgment. "I want to explain," he began, but his voice caught. Nadia was stressed. Her parents, they had these ideas about how everything should look, and I just wanted to keep the peace. "I didn't mean for you to feel erased," I finished for him, my tone calm but steady. "That's exactly what I felt. Owen. Like I didn't exist. Like all those years meant nothing." He sat down, elbows on his knees, rubbing his temples. "I know. I saw it. I saw you sitting by the kitchen, and He stopped, ashamed. I should have said something. I crossed my arms, holding my ground. "You should have stood up. Not for flowers, not for a seat, but for me, for your mother." His eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time I saw the boy who used to look to me for answers. There was no defense left in him, no excuses strong enough, only a raw honesty. "I failed you," he admitted, voice breaking. "I was a coward. I thought if I stayed quiet, the night would go smoothly, but all I did was betray the one person who has always been there for me." Silence filled the room, heavy and necessary. I let it linger so he would feel the full weight of his words. Then I walked to the side table and picked up the small wooden box I had set there earlier. Inside were copies of every receipt, every invoice, every check I had written for the wedding. I set it in his lap. "This isn't about money," I told him. "It never was. But I need you to see the cost. Not just the cost in dollars, but the cost of silence. Yours, mine. All those times I stayed quiet to keep peace. Just like you did. It ends here." He stared at the box, then back at me. His eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not today," I answered. My voice softened, but the steel remained. "But if you want to earn it, you'll have to start standing up. Not just in front of others, but in front of yourself." He nodded slowly, shoulders shaking. For the first time in years, he looked like a man stripped of pretense, sitting in my living room with nothing but regret and the chance to do better. I didn't reach to comfort him. Not yet. Some distances can't be closed in a single afternoon. But as he sat there, humbled, I knew a line had been drawn. He understood it, and so did I. By the end of that week, I knew what I needed to do. For too long, I had let other people decide where I belonged. First Mark when he left, then the Sloanes with their plans, even Owen with his silence. It was time to choose my own place, to gather the people who had never once pushed me aside. I spent Saturday morning at the farmer's market downtown, picking out fresh corn, tomatoes heavy on the vine, a cut of beef for roasting. I even bought a small bouquet of sunflowers, bright and stubborn, standing tall no matter where they were planted. Carrying the bags to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. This meal wasn't about show or photographs. It was about presence. On Sunday, I set the table with care. Nothing extravagant, just the quilt I had sewn months earlier folded across the center, its patchwork squares catching the afternoon light. Around it I placed mismatched plates collected over decades, each one holding a story. The house smelled of garlic and rosemary as the roast cooked slowly in the oven. When the doorbell rang, Mona was first, her laugh filling the hallway. Then Bernie shuffled in with his old guitar case, promising to play after dinner. Grace arrived with a peach cobbler that still radiated warmth. We hugged, we laughed, and together we carried dishes to the table. My living room glowed with voices and movement, a kind of joy that no banquet hall could replicate. Halfway through setting out the glasses, there was another knock. I opened the door to find Owen standing there. No tie, no pretense, just holding a bowl of potato salad awkwardly in both hands. "I thought I'd bring something," he said quietly. For a moment I hesitated. Then I stepped aside. He walked in, greeted my friends politely, and without waiting for instruction, slipped into the kitchen to help. He washed dishes, fetched serving spoons, moved silently among us. No grand speeches, only small, steady actions. Watching him rinse plates beside Mona, sleeves rolled up, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the fragile start of repair. When the food was ready, we gathered around the table. Glasses clinked, laughter swelled, and I lifted my wine. The quilt beneath our plates, the sunflowers bright against the window, the faces of people who had chosen me. It all came together in a way the wedding never could. "To the families we are given," I said. Then let my eyes rest on Owen. "And the families we choose." "Hari!" They echoed the toast, voices mingling, and for the first time in a long while, I felt myself at the very center of the picture, not erased, not sidelined, but fully present. That night, after the dishes were stacked and the last slice of peach cobbler scraped from the pan, the house settled into a quiet hum. Bernie strummed his guitar in the corner, soft chords that floated through the living room like a lullaby. Mona and Grace chatted over coffee, their voices warm and familiar. Owen dried plates at the sink, shoulders relaxed, his movements unhurried. For the first time in weeks, my home felt whole. I leaned against the doorway, watching the scene unfold. It wasn't a ballroom lit with chandeliers or a program printed on heavy cardstock. It was mismatched plates, a quilt spread across the table, and the glow of lamplight bouncing off old picture frames. And yet it felt richer, more sacred than anything that had happened at the old granary. The letters from Mark were tucked safely back in the cedar chest, but their words lived in me now. "You chose to be a mother every day." That sentence echoed as I watched Owen rinse another glass, his face thoughtful. I had spent so many years measuring my worth in sacrifices, in how much I could give without asking for recognition. But recognition wasn't something I needed from programs or speeches. It was something I could give myself and surround myself with people who saw it without question. When the last guest left and the front door clicked shut, Owen lingered. He didn't try to apologize again. He didn't ask for anything. Instead, he hugged me, short, almost clumsy, but real. Then he whispered, "I'll do better." I didn't answer right away. I just held him, long enough to let him know I heard, long enough to believe he might keep that promise. Later, as I turned off the lights and the house grew still, I walked past the dining table. The quilt was still spread across it, crumbs of bread scattered like confetti. I touched the fabric, the stitches holding strong, each square sewn from scraps of my life, bits of dresses, curtains, old shirts, imperfect pieces, chosen and bound together into something lasting. I poured myself a final glass of wine and sat alone for a moment. Outside, the night was quiet, the air cool against the windows. Inside, I felt steady, centered, no longer pressed into the shadows. I raised my glass softly, just for myself this time. "To the mothers who have been silent too long," I whispered, "and to the ones who choose, every day, to stand in the center of their own story."